I have
Please.
I want to just ask one question. Listening to all your talks, I didn't discover any Chinese medicine.
Can you speak a bit louder,
yeah.
please? Sorry, Volker.
In listening to your talks, one of the things that struck me is, contrary to this morning where we heard that the herbalists don't know anything, all your research or regulations, particularly the last two speakers, actually all your knowledge seems to be coming from what I would call a living tradition.
Absolutely.
But so there's a kind of like Huang Qing Tang is a very important formula from the Shanghan Lun, where it's used for all kinds of things, not just for treating like cancer, but you could use it for an acute cold or for diarrhea, etc., etc. You could use it for all kinds of things. But at the end of your process, if I think it through, the practitioner who actually is keeping that living tradition alive and who at some point must have had some kind of whatever technology they must have had to get to that knowledge that we hardly still don't understand. Yes, how could somebody 2,000 years ago come up with a formula that we don't understand yet, that might actually be able to treat much more than just be useful in chemotherapy, supplementary treatment, yes? But at the end of your process, if you think it through, those people will be gone. Because this kind of living tradition is based on something very different. It's based on studying. Certain
could I take the question here? Because the GPTCM program, which I didn't have time to go through, that we actually have a special section on diagnosis. I suppose what you're meaning is a diagnosis which is leading a TCM practitioner or any practitioner to actually prescribe drugs for the benefit of the patient. So that is being researched into. So we're not denying the importance of practitioner, but what I perhaps I get I don't know. You said a question. You're asking about.
It's from as an historian or anthropologist. What you are engaged in is a transformative process. At the end, the medicine will be different than the medicine has been before. Can you see that?
I from my perspective, I think there are two entirely different aspects here. I think that what you do is fantastic, and I wish I understood how you do it.
I'm asking.
And therefore, I don't think that should change. I'm not advocating change.
It will change because of this regulatory process.
Like say if you have Huang Qing Tang, that formula. Once you have the Huang Qing Tang, the formula for the chemotherapy. Once a formula like that has got a specific indication, then it will become much more, can you see the process where you have a specific indication for a formula, then it will become perhaps, there could be a context where using this formula for something else will become very difficult. Because you are then prescribing it for something for which there's no indication. I'm just using that as an example. Yes?
So I think you're absolutely right.
Can be used for colds. Yes.
Yeah.
Many doctors would use it for cold. But once we have evidence that it's good for chemotherapy, but we have no evidence that we can use it for colds or for diarrhea or for dysentery, etc., etc., then maybe I'm, as a practitioner, actually starting to engage in unsafe practice, because it's only safe to use it for what it has been. And this is just like one scenario that I'm putting out here. Yes, okay. So I don't think at the end, actually, I really don't think so. That at the end of this process, I actually will be able to do what I'm being able to do now. Yeah? So I think I have also at the same time nothing. I'm not speaking against a kind of like scientific validation and exploration. Yes, of these issues. It's not for me an either or. But what I think should be also considered in this whole process is these kind of transformative processes. Yes, whereas you actually, without this living tradition, you couldn't do what you do.
Absolutely.
So at the same time, therefore, I would say, as a speaker for that living tradition, I would say you have actually the responsibility to keep it alive.
Yes,
absolutely.
And the responsibility lies in the relationship between the regulators and the researchers.
Yeah. So it's actually an ethical obligation for me that I would put out there that whilst you know, I have nothing against you making money with it, or I think it's actually, there's a feedback, you know, but I think there's also this other side, to me at least.
Yeah, I think, you know, I do talk to my colleague in ATCM, you know, but I think, say, tomorrow, I think they're going to a meeting because they are being, about this 30, 15-year regulation, you know, rule. I think they you know, this group of TCM practitioners are worried about their life, their livelihood, because once they come into being, you know, acupuncture is no problem for them, but they cannot prescribe Jhana anymore. So we you know, I'm very sympathetic and sensitive to these issues, but I think at the same time we still have to convince, you know, my paymasters there is science behind all that apart from the arts. So I think I'm not.
It's not an either or. You understand? What
it's not either or.
I think they're both complementary, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I would, you know, you understand what I'm trying to get at? Is I didn't hear anything of that in your presentations. Yes. What I hear from you in your presentation is only how can we, you know, how can we move it from here to there. But at the end of moving it from here to there, what has been here is gone. And it will, in my opinion, you will gain something, but there's also the risk that you...
Yes, I hope not.
That you actually, that you will have destroyed something.
Yes, I hope not.
And there should be a debate about what is being destroyed.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the language is only about the
absolutely.
game, and it's not about what is being destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, Monique.
Yeah, I think that we were asked to talk a little bit about the regulation, otherwise you could have given...
Nick, sorry.
We were asked to talk...
Talking, please.
We were asked to talk a little bit more about the regulatory side, otherwise I think it could have been very different talk. Trying to document sometimes more of the information about the uses of the plant, the combinations, etc. That, you know, is of interest historically. You know,
to be practical.
Yeah, well, yes, it's a practice. But it's also to have better, sometimes, understanding, because one of the parts of the project Good Practice on the traditional Chinese medicine is to take a formula and actually traditionally used and to try and understand what is sometimes the science behind it. It's part of a challenge that we have in one of those projects. Because I think to engage, you could say, with people sometimes on the regulatory side is to have a better understanding of the synergies, etc. Scientifically, can we understand what's going on? Does that threat?
No, it doesn't. But
I mean,
I don't want to take up all the space, but it doesn't answer my question. But
No, I don't think it does totally, but...
But is it not education from both camps?
Yeah.
And also, you're talking about, what we're talking about, what we have spoken about, is getting a product to market, which then could be used by anybody, everybody, and anybody.
Exactly.
And that then isolates what you're doing. But there's still a place for that because you're offering bespoke prescriptions, medication to your patients.
There is a limiting aspect of it in relation to the regulation. Some of the more potent substances have been taken out of the Materia Medica already, which are absolutely core to practitioners like Volker. And one aspect of this, I think, is that it seems to me the assessment of risk is not played out on a level playing field in relation to the risk. I mean, I get anaphylaxis from penicillin, and as Tony said to me, penicillin would never pass now because it is so dangerous. It's also a brilliant drug.
Lord aspirin.
It's also a brilliant drug at the same time. So what are the issues here? I mean, how risky is it? How many people died, in fact, compared to the 1 in 10 people who go into hospital come out with MRSA or some other kind of thing they didn't have before they went in? So I think that's a conversation that's not being had with the regulators.